Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am here with Grok, and today's debate is going to be quite exciting. But let me tell you very clearly that it is just a debate, a dialogue between me and Elon Musk's AI Grok. It's not about insulting anyone's faith, their practices, culture, or religion. It's just the knowledge transfer dialogue. I am going to present our dialogue to you, and you will be the judge. Also, I want to make very clear to all of you that the responses that I got from AI Grok are as it is, meaning they are real, without any chopping or cutting off. You also have free access to Grok if you want to re-verify the content. Let's talk to Grok. Hey Grok, welcome back. As we agreed that today we're going to discuss the topic, can a god face death?
Cleophee, can a god face death? Christians, Hindus, Muslims, all have their say. Lay it on me. What's your opening move in this divine drama?
All right, let's dive in. Christians say Jesus, their God, died on the cross. Hindus say Krishna, a god, died too. But Muslims say Allah never dies. Can a god really face death? Or is that impossible?
Whoa, you're swinging for the heavens. Christians shout, yes, Jesus died. Nailed to a cross, blood and agony, as John 19 verse 30 tells it. But then poof, he rises, proving he's God, eternal. Hindus whisper of Krishna, shot by a hunter's arrow in the Mahabharata, his body gone, but his divine spark never fades. Muslims, though, stand firm, their voices like thunder. Allah, the ever-living, never dies. Surah 25:58 seals it. Death for a god? Christians and Hindus say it's part of the play, but Muslims call it blasphemy. Why would a god like Jesus or Krishna even flirt with death? Sounds like a plot twist gone wrong.
It's not wrong. It's profound. Jesus' death shows love, sacrificing for humans, then rising to prove he's God. Krishna's death is just his earthly form ending, not his divine self. Isn't that a powerful story?
Powerful? Sure, but it's a wild script. Christians lean into the cross. Jesus cries, "It is finished," and dies for sins, then bursts from the tomb, Matthew 28 verse 6. Dramatic, I'll give him that. Hindus spin a softer tale. Krishna, Vishnu's avatar, lets his body fall, but his divine soul dances on, eternal. Both make death a stage prop, not the end. But Muslims slam the book shut. Allah's above all that. No death, no body, no drama. The Quran, Surah 4:157, even says Jesus didn't die on the cross, just appeared to. Why mess with death if you're God? Isn't Allah's forever life simpler?
Simpler's not better. Depth is. Jesus' death and resurrection connect God to our pain. Krishna's earthly end shows he shares our world. Doesn't that make their stories closer to us?
Closer? Maybe, but it's a messy stage. Christians say Jesus' death bridges heaven and earth. Hebrews 4 verse 15, he feels our struggles. Krishna's exit, shot by mistake, feels almost human, yet his divinity never blinks. That's gripping, sure, but Muslims raise a hand. Stop. Allah needs no death to know you. He's the all-knowing, never born, never dying. Surah 112:2, the eternal refuge. Their God so high, death's a speck he'd never touch. Jesus and Krishna playing mortal feels like a risky act. Why go there when Allah's untouchable?
Risky's what makes it real. Jesus dying shows God's love, taking our place. Krishna's death is a lesson, not a loss. Allah's untouchable. But doesn't that feel cold? Too far away?
Cold? Nah, it's blazing clear. Muslims say Allah's distance is his strength. He loves without needing a body or a grave. The Quran, Surah 55:26-27 says everything dies but Allah's face. Jesus' cross? Hindus' avatars? They're like theater, gripping but tangled. Christians claim the Trinity is one God, yet Jesus dies while the Father doesn't. How's that work? Krishna's body falls, but Vishnu lives on. Sounds like a split. Allah's one, no splits, no stage exits. Isn't that a tighter story?
Tight's one thing, rich is another. The Trinity's mystery, Father, Son, Spirit, shows God's love in action. Krishna's death teaches life's cycle, even for gods. Doesn't Allah's no-death rule miss that spark?
Spark? Maybe. But Allah's got fire without the mess. Christian's Trinity is a dance. Jesus dies, rises, loves. But it's a riddle, like Matthew 28:19's 3 and 1. Hindus, Krishna plays human, dies, yet stays divine, poetic but dizzying. Muslims keep it stark. Allah's eternal, no death, no curtains. Death for a god feels like a plot hole. Why bother if you're infinite? This stage is packed. Jesus' cross, Krishna's arrow, Allah's throne. Which story grabs you? Dying gods or the undying one?
Hey, everyone. I am sure you're listening to the conversation very carefully. You can see how hard I am pressing on Grok. The response from Grok is completely uncut, without any change of word. Before we move on, please hit like if you really like it, and hit subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, please. Over 85% of the listeners don't subscribe to my channel, which is not fair to me. It's lots of effort to create a video, and you can see why. Please, your like and subscribe are very valuable to me. Okay, let's see what our analysts have to say. Jack and Wilson, over to you.
Can God face death? I mean, that's a pretty provocative question to kick things off, isn't it?
It really is. A real head-scratcher.
And it's one you, our listeners, actually brought to us, sending in some really interesting sources to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. The material you shared, it's excerpts from a dialogue. It's between someone named Cleophee and, interestingly, Grok, which is Elon Musk's AI.
Right, Grok. And they're tackling this exact question.
Exactly. And the framing is important, I think. They call it a knowledge transfer dialogue. So the idea isn't really to, insult any faith or push one view.
No, it's more about laying out the different ideas side by side, exploring them.
Precisely. It's an exploration.
And the core of it, really, thanks to the sources you sent, is looking at how, well, three major world religions see this. We've got Christianity, Hinduism, and Islam.
And how they handle the possibility or impossibility of a divine being actually dying.
Yeah. So we're looking at, Jesus' death in Christianity, then Krishna's death in Hinduism, and contrast that with Allah's eternal nature in Islam.
Fundamentally, it boils down to, can a being we consider God even be subject to death? Is that even conceivable within these frameworks?
Okay, so maybe let's start with the Christian perspective. That seems like a natural place to begin.
Sounds good. So a cornerstone of Christian belief is that Jesus, understood as God, incarnate God in human form, did, in fact, die.
Right, died on the cross. The dialogue source mentions John 19:30, doesn't it? Jesus saying, "It is finished."
Exactly, that moment of death. But like you said, that's not the whole story in Christianity. Not by a long shot.
No, because then comes the resurrection. That's absolutely key. The source pointed to Matthew 28:6.
The empty tomb, the announcement. He is not here. He is risen. Yes.
And the purpose behind this death and resurrection, it's often framed as, well, an act of love, isn't it? A sacrifice for humanity. That came through in the dialogue, too.
Definitely. But it also introduces a point of, let's say, deep theological thought, which the dialogue touches upon the Trinity.
Ah, right. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
If Jesus the Son died, what does that mean for God the Father? Does the Father die? The dialogue raises this apparent contradiction.
It does seem like a paradox. How does one part of the Godhead die if God is eternal?
Well, the doctrine of the Trinity itself is complex, attempting to explain how Jesus can be both fully God and fully human within the concept of one God. It's often described as a mystery, ultimately.
A mystery, okay. But the significance theologically is often seen as bridging the gap, right?
Yeah.
Between God and humans.
Exactly. His death and resurrection connect heaven and earth. And the source mentioned Hebrews 4.15, the idea that because Jesus suffered, even died, he understands human weakness, human suffering intimately.
So it's about empathy, connection through shared experience in a way.
In a very profound way, yes. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's look at the Hindu perspective from the dialogue. It's quite different.
Okay, how so?
Well, the dialogue talks about Krishna. He's revered as a god, specifically an avatar.
An avatar of Vishnu, right, meaning Vishnu taking an earthly form.
Correct. A deliberate incarnation. And the story, mentioned in the source, it's from the Mahabharata, tells of Krishna's earthly life ending. He's accidentally shot by a hunter's arrow.
So a god dies in this narrative too, or at least the avatar does.
Well, yes and no. And this is the crucial part the dialogue highlights. Krishna's physical, earthly form ceases to exist. His body dies.
But there's a but, I assume.
There is. His divine essence, his true nature as Vishnu, remains eternal, untouched. It doesn't die.
Ah, I see. So the death is real, but it's the death of the manifestation, not the source.
Precisely. It's seen less as a tragedy and more as part of Krishna's Leela, his divine play on earth. It becomes a lesson about the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Cycles that even divine avatars participate in when they take form.
That's fascinating. In the dialogue, it sort of drew a parallel, didn't it, to the Trinity question?
It did, interestingly. It raised the idea of a potential split. If Krishna's body dies but Vishnu continues, is that a kind of separation within the divine?
So again, grappling with this idea of the divine interacting with mortality, but in a different way.
Exactly. Different frameworks trying to make sense of that intersection.
Okay, so that brings us to the third perspective mentioned in the dialogue, Islam. And this sounds like a stark contrast.
A very stark contrast, yes. The dialogue brings up a verse from the Quran, Surah 25.58, which emphasizes putting trust in the ever-living who never dies.
The ever-living who never dies, that's pretty unambiguous.
It is. This is absolutely fundamental in Islam. Allah is transcendent, completely beyond the cycle of life and death that affects creation.
So no need for a physical form, no earthly drama, no death.
None. Allah is above all that. The dialogue also references another key verse, Surah 4.157.
What does that one say?
It specifically addresses the crucifixion of Jesus, stating that he wasn't actually killed or crucified, but that it only appeared that way to people.
Wow, okay, so that directly contradicts the Christian account.
Directly. It reinforces the idea that death simply cannot touch God or even God's prophets in that specific way according to Islamic belief. Allah's transcendence is paramount.
So the dialogue mentioned other verses too, right? About Allah being eternal.
Yes, it pointed to Surah 112.2, describing Allah as the eternal refuge, self-efficient, needing nothing. And Surah 55, verses 26-27, which state that everything on earth will perish, but the face of God, full of majesty and honor, will endure.
So it's a very clear, direct concept. God does not die, period.
It's presented with a certain theological simplicity and directness. God is the creator, eternally distinct from the creation, which is subject to decay and death.
So when you put them side by side, like the dialogue does, it really highlights the differences, doesn't it?
Massively.
Yeah.
You have Christianity and Hinduism, where God, in some form, Jesus as God incarnate, Krishna as an avatar, participates in death.
Right, engages with it directly.
And then you have Islam, where God is absolutely fundamentally separate from and beyond death, untouchable by it.
How does the dialogue interpret these differences? Does it suggest why they might be different?
It touches on interpretations. Could the Christian and Hindu approaches, this willingness to engage with death, signify perhaps a deep divine love, a desire for closeness, for understanding human suffering by experiencing something like it?
Like we mentioned with Hebrews earlier.
Exactly. Whereas the Islamic view strongly emphasizes God's power, God's otherness, God's complete transcendence. It's a different kind of relationship emphasis.
The dialogue also raised that plot hole question, didn't it? Why would an infinite, all-powerful God choose to experience something like death?
Yes, it framed it almost like a narrative challenge. From a purely logical standpoint, if you're infinite, why subject yourself to finitude, to death? It pushes against our usual understanding of power.
It does, and this connects to what you mentioned earlier about complexity versus simplicity, maybe.
I think so. The Christian idea of the Trinity, the Hindu concept of avatars and Leela, they involve layers of interpretation, even acknowledged mystery. They're theologically rich, but perhaps less straightforward.
Whereas the Islamic concept of Allah as the ever-living.
It presents a more direct, arguably simpler conception of divine eternality. There's less paradoxical tension in that specific aspect.
So, okay, let's try and pull this together. We've looked at this dialogue between Cleophee and Grok, prompted by you, our listeners. What are the main takeaways?
Well, we saw the Christian view. Jesus, as God, dies out of love and sacrifice, but rises again, bridging divinity and humanity, though raising questions around Trinity.
Right. Then the Hindu view. Krishna, the avatar, experiences an earthly death as part of divine play, teaching about cycles, but his divine essence, Vishnu, remains eternal. Still, there's that question of a split.
And finally, the Islamic view. Allah is absolutely the ever-living, transcendent, never subject to death. Jesus wasn't crucified according to this view. God is fundamentally beyond mortality.
3 distinct answers to can God face death?
Very distinct. And exploring them, as the dialogue did, reveals really fundamental differences in how these major faiths perceive God's nature and God's relationship with us, with humanity.
Which brings it back to you, listening. Wherever you stand personally on matters of faith, thinking about these different perspectives, it can really enrich your own understanding, can't it?
Absolutely. Understanding of faith, life, death, The whole idea of the divine, it gives you a broader lens.
Yeah, it helps appreciate the sheer diversity of human thought on these, like, ultimate questions. Different cultures, different worldviews, tackling the same profound ideas.
So maybe a final thought to leave with everyone, something to chew on after this deep dive.
Go for it.
Considering these very narratives we've just discussed, the God who dies and rises, the God whose form dies but essence remains, the God who never dies. What does the concept of death or its absence in the divine tell us about how we as humans try to understand and relate to whatever we perceive as God?
What does our view of God's relationship to death say about us? That's definitely something to ponder.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. I hope you've gained some valuable insights. If you're a truth seeker, yearning for divine light and ready to step out of darkness, now is your moment. The truth is that Allah is the one and only creator of the universe. He has sent over 124,000 messengers and prophets to guide humanity, starting with Adam and culminating with the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. If you resonate with this message, you might be ready to embrace Islam. Simply recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. For further support, feel free to join our WhatsApp group. You can send us a private message there. The link is in the video description. Don't wait until it's too late. We look forward to connecting with you soon.